Mahajan, Mr. Pratap Patode, distinguished participants and award winners. It's a pleasure to be participating in the 5th KPMG Infrastructure Today Awards. This occasion provides me with yet another opportunity to interact with the infrastructure players. I believe that infrastructure will be the game changer for India. It will be a game changer if we are able to get our Infrastructure Act right. And I believe we are heading in that direction. And by getting this act right, we would really become an economic powerhouse. Sometimes, as was said, that there are headwinds and things have been difficult. I must say that we sometimes try to look at the negative. Of course, there are challenges in infrastructure. PPP models was something new to India. Even now, whether it's to the private sector or to government, PPP models have been a great learning experience. We see we've got successful PPP models. We've had PPP models which ran into difficulty. Now, this is because of this being a completely new experience. And I must say that if we are to get our infrastructure right, there has to be a mindset change within government. Sometimes within government, we've been used to the PWD or various government departments carrying out projects. And when we approach a PPP model, the whole game changes. So this mindset in government is taking place. And I'm happy. I see it all around. I saw it in various capacities. We must remember that in India also a psyche got built up, that whatever is not boom is gloom. So you hear people saying that we are only having 17% growth. The auto sector is depressed because they say we've got 15 to 17% growth. I ask them, what is your growth? They say it's 15 to 17%. But there is a gloom. Other countries are struggling for a 2% growth. And when we have a growth of 15 to 17% in a sector, we take our steel sector, our cement sector, of course it's not a boom. But a boom does not necessarily mean a gloom. And that is one very important point, this psyche which got built up, that there is a gloom all around. I'm afraid we must recognize these realities. There is today a significant focus on the infrastructure sector by all sections of society. Recognitions of achievers at this Excellence Awards is an example of this itself. It is heartening to see that the entire spectrum of the infrastructure sector is being recognized today in these ceremonies, from companies engaged in renewable energy to power and transport to water and the urban sector, and also financing companies. The people of India are in a hurry to bridge the infrastructure deficit, and the government on its part is committed to providing the enabling environment will usher in the decade of infrastructure development. The infrastructure development is not a buzzword. It has become a buzzword because it's so crucial to India at this moment. And across all infrastructure sectors, whether it is power, whether it is ports and airports, railways, roads, the problem in India is that growth preceded infrastructure. When growth preceded infrastructure, we have this huge infrastructure deficit. And what we are going to be building really now in the next 5 years is not building for the future. We're not building our capacity, but we'll be catching up with the past. And if we don't do it, this is a great threat to our growth. It's a threat to our competitiveness and a threat to inclusive growth. As was said, that the investment in the infrastructure sector and the 12th plan, that is from 2012 to 2017, is expected to be $1 trillion. And this will take the share of infrastructure in our GDP to 10%. It used to be 2%, 3%. Now it's going to go up to 10%. we have huge requirements, whether it's any sector. We take the power sector. The 11th plan targeted 62,000 megawatts of capacity. Now, out of 62,000 megawatts of capacity, 47,000 megawatts has been achieved. 9 ultra mega power projects of 4,000 megawatts each have been identified for development, of which 4 are different stages of implementation. Because cutting across various government departments was a big problem. Everyone had an issue. So the government has set up the Cabinet Committee on Investment. It's had just 2 meetings up till now. It's positioning itself so that some of the bottlenecks which have been there in infrastructure are addressed immediately, whether it is the power sector, whether it's the railways. In railways, we have the 3rd largest network in the world, and the focus now is on improved safety, technology upgradation, and capacity enhancement. There is a huge target which has been set for new lines, 25,000 kilometers, for new electrification, 14,000 kilometers, and construction of high-speed rail corridors. The road sector is again a very big challenge. We have the world's 2nd largest road network, and the national highways account for only 2% of it. So here again, the challenge is great. We've had problems in the PPP sector in this. Some are success stories. We sometimes fail to look at the success stories. Of course, there are problems in some of the road projects, but if we look at the whole gamut of road projects over the last several years, there are many, many more success stories which are running into problems. Well, we've now got the Cabinet Committee on Investments looking into it. In civil aviation, we are not only looking at the metro airports, we are looking at 35 new non-metro airports. And the terminal in Delhi was a classic example of how infrastructure can be built in record time. Indian ports, we have 12 major ports and 200 non-major ports. Capacity addition is being done of over 1,000 million tons in major ports, which is now on the anvil. This will help us in decreasing the turnaround time. We got a very, very, very poor show on our ports on turnaround time. Now I come to urban infrastructure. Here, this is the biggest challenge because you feel a problem of other infrastructure, whether if it's roads, if you're on a highway, airport when you go to a highway, if you go to an airport, rail when you go to travel by rail, you feel the shortage. But urban infrastructure is a part of one's daily life, and you feel it every day. The challenges of urbanization in India are unprecedented in scale and significance. In the last 1 century, 1901 to 2001, the total population of India increased from 238 million to 1,210 million. That is, it increased 5 times in 100 years. But the urban population increased 15 times, from 25 million to 377 million. In the last decade alone, in 2001, we had a urban population of 285 million. And in 2011, our urban population was 400 million. And it is expected to reach 600 million in the next decade. The number of our towns is just not the mega cities. It's the small towns, it's the small municipalities, it's the medium-sized municipalities. Our towns increased from 5,161 in 2001 to close to 8,000 in 2011. We already have 53 million plus cities in India, and this is expected to go up to 70, besides our mega cities and besides the 3 million, 4 million population cities. Now, with a young demographic profile, with a young age profile, the mobility of the youngsters is much more. And the Indian urban sector today is contributing 60% of GDP. In the next decade, urban areas will contribute 70% of our GDP. And 70% of our new job opportunities shall be in the urban areas. The number of people who are migrating from rural areas to the cities is on the increase. And now it's in the increase in our smaller towns. If we are to see what is the urbanization taking place in our smaller towns, we see that cities with a population of 1 lakh and below, the population increase will be from 112 to 171 million, a 52% growth. So the urbanization is not necessarily to the big cities. It's taking place in our medium-sized cities, in our smaller cities. And this is a huge challenge. 7 years ago, for the first time, the central government decided to assist the states by the Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission. Now, that was the first attempt to look at and fund urbanization, to fund urban projects. Now, there's been a lot to learn in the first phase. In JNURM1, there's been a lot to learn. Lot to learn and some very basic things to learn. First, building capacity. We do not have the right people. We do not have municipal services. You train somebody. You have a capacity building program, and you train somebody. After 1 year, he is transferred to another department. We have municipal officers who come from the veterinary department, who come from various departments who are on deputation. They are not interested in their job. They are only posted there because they want to live in that particular area. So, capacity building is a huge challenge which we have. And in this, we are now framing the JNURM2. In principally, the JNURM2 has been approved. We have extended the JNURM1. And this year, we'll be awarding projects of 15,000 crores with an extended urban renewal mission, the first one. We are looking at a basket of PPP projects. How do we have PPP projects in water, in waste management? Because we will require private sector funding for this. So PPP is going to be a very important segment where government will give a viability gap funding for PPP projects on water, on sewage, and all other, in sanitation, in all PPP projects. Now in PPP, there's no one size fits all. A small municipality, a large one, a municipal corporation, all differ. So we are working on a large number of PPP models, which will apply for different scales and for different cities. We have announced a national urban transport policy, which is to move people, not vehicles. And whether it's the metro rail projects or the BRTS or ITS, how do we integrate transportation? But the problem is just not urbanization, it's suburbanization. We need to be looking at suburbanization, planned suburbanization. Up till now, most of the suburbanization which we've had has been by default, not by design. So we're going to have planned suburbanization. What is the infrastructure we need for planned suburbanization? How do we integrate transport? Transport, we've got this classic case of the Delhi Metro. We are in the phase 1 of the Delhi Metro, phase 3 of the Delhi Metro. We'll soon be starting phase 4. When we complete phase 4 of Delhi Metro, we would have built 440 kilometers of the metro, which will be larger than the London Underground. Now we got to integrate this. We got to integrate this with monorails. We got to integrate this with BRTS. We got to integrate this with the intelligent transport system. And that's just not for Delhi. That's even for our cities with a population above 2 million. And we've decided to do DPRs, detailed project reports for monorails and for metros in all cities above 2 million. We will be funding this. We will be supporting the funding to the state governments on this. Most important of all is how do we have housing for the economically weaker section. In Delhi alone, 40 lakh people live in unauthorized colonies. How do we build housing for low-income groups and the economically weaker sections. We are looking at an RRTS, a regional railway transport, a fast train. How do we have dispersal in cities? Like in Delhi, we are looking at a fast train from here to Panipat and so on, into Haryana, into other parts, so that the pressure on Delhi, on our cities, decreases. We all know that in India we have a very low FAR and FSI. And how do we have the optimum FAR and FSI? Delhi, for example, cannot expand. Delhi cannot expand. On one side is Haryana, on one side is UP. How do you expand? And if you can't expand, how do you build your housing? So you've got to have the most efficient use of land. Land use efficiency is something we've not looked at, we've not planned. That's why the 12th plan paper talks about efficient use of land. And I believe there's a great need to carefully examine the FAR issues, looking at the ground situation, the ground infrastructure, and the infrastructure which needs to be built. That is one of the most important things. So the challenges in urban infrastructure are the most profound. Urban infrastructure of the density of our country. If from the landmass of India, you were to take away the mountains, the forests, the deserts, the water bodies, India is very dense. India has very high density. So all land use management has to be planned holistically, and an exercise and an effort has been started in that direction. So, as I said at the outset, the government is committed to eliminating this infrastructure deficit, and we look forward to participation by the private sector in a much bigger way. Before I conclude, I'd like to congratulate all the winners and also applaud KPMG for creating these awards and recognizing the talent which we have in our country. Thank you very much.
We thank the Honorable Minister for sharing